Oh, go away. So quickly, I'm going to write out my strategy and y'all can tell me if it makes sense. It makes sense to me though. For, and I'm realizing that the way I approach the markets and the time frames in which I approach it with doesn't make sense on every pair, but it works best on oil, GJ, US 30, and the S&P 500. So the first thing I want to see is I want to see the 4 hour flow aligned with the weekly. And then I have my H1 and I call it Willis zone from my other mentor. And then lower time frame chat pattern. So this is it. All right. So if I go on the 4 hour time frame, I see that it was yesterday when we finally stopped making these lower highs, lower highs, lower highs, lower highs. Boom. Okay, now we got two bullish candles. Two bullish 4 hour candles is exactly what I was waiting to see before I can now go on the 1 hour time frame, plot my fib, point A, point B, and then wait for it to drop back in there and create a little chart pattern, right? So today, and let's go to the weekly. So we see the current weekly flow. Lower highs maintained, lower highs maintained, lower highs maintained, and then boom, it was break. I don't know if this will actually hold too far though, because the monthly flow is bearish, right? The weekly is not in flow with the monthly. I will say that. But this being the weekly time frame, I do think it has a potential to at least do something cute. Something cute. So we see that the 4 hour flow is bullish, and now the weekly flow is bullish. Now I see on the 1 hour time frame, I fell into that 50% fib. And the chart pattern that I used today, because I saw that, well, I was on the 15 minute. I like to look at the 15 minute for chart patterns, but I didn't. We got the 1 hour respecting support immediately to the left before actually getting a 15 minute double bottom, which is what I would like to see usually. So, like if an H1 double bottom presents itself, I'm not gonna say no to it because technically it's stronger than a 15-minute or 30-minute time frame. So we have a level of support right here. You look to the left, boom. What did it do? Respected it. To me, that's a double bottom. Now look at price flying. So we have all of that. And then, yeah, so lower time frame chart pattern, whether it be H1, M30, M15. And then we have the time. When it comes to oral, I can actually trade it as early as 6:30 a.m. Because I realize that it does give really, really good moves starting there that don't go back and hit stop loss. Unlike US based peers, like an EU or GU or gold, I would have to wait for 9:30. But this is the formula that I use for this. So if this works out, please feel free to copy. Um, and this is what kept me so consistent when it came to early May, late April. And then I fell off because why? Because of this part. I wasn't paying attention to the weekly flow at all. At all. So now this is why I'm throwing this in there so that I can always be in sync with the higher time frames and not lose my weight. That's why it's a part of my rules now. And that's what I feel like is going to really help me. So, for example, something like this is the only trade I'm looking at for today. But for something like EU, this wouldn't actually work because every time we actually do come into a level that makes sense for a 50% level, it actually the 4 hour flips. So it's like, okay, I can't trade anymore if I'm going according to these rules. Then I realized because EU is a slower mover than GJ, Oil, US 30, S&P 500, I can do the same strategy. I just have to bump the time frames up on everything. So for example, I would want the daily flow to be in line with the monthly flow. So let's look at the daily flow like back here because this is where I really lost my shit. So, okay, we have the lower highs maintaining, lower highs maintaining, lower highs maintained until when these two bullish candles came and told me that that was over. And why am I going with the monthly? Because as you see to the left, we are far above this. Although, to be fair, the monthly wasn't necessarily too bearish. I mean, too bullish because I saw this level right here, two candles close underneath it. And typically what that means for me is, okay, lower highs, expect them, right? So that's usually how it goes unless it taps into a major level and it'll immediately reverse because these major blue levels are where things will get crazy and reverse just on a dime like that. That's why I got them plotted out. But so yeah, even like if I had looked at the weekly time frame, I would never trade against the weekly, knowing what I know now. Because if I just traded with the weekly, we would have been, I would have been fine. Would have been fine. So we have the mega time frame, which is the weekly and the monthly. That flow is cool. And then when the daily syncs up, which is right here, then I can go on the 4 hour and plot my fib. Right? So I'm doing like the same thing that I would do on with another pair, but here. So point A and let's see, point B. And then we come in here. So once price gets into this level, what am I now waiting for? Willistone, now I'm looking for an H1 or H4 chart pattern for entry. So there's nothing on the H4. There's not even an engulfing, but maybe if I go on the 1 hour, I'll see something. And I would prefer not to go on like the M15 unless the 1 hour flow was in my favor already. So we see what a whoop, we came down here and then we started making higher lows. I think this would be my first thing right here because I have a level of support, right? And we come back down and tested it to continue bullish. So to me, this is a double bottom, which then I would have entered in, based off of everything that was happening. So that's just some clarity for me because I didn't realize that I couldn't use the same exact strategy on just everything because I mean I can, it's a little bit more rare on EU because it's a slower mover. Like here, I would have been able to do it because the daily, when we had our last lower high on the daily, boom, boom, two bullish candles come on the 4 hour, plot out my fab. My fab. So I have high low right here, bring it to the high. Now, once I start getting to the 50% level, I can start looking for chart patterns on the 4 hour or 1 hour time frame. So let's go right here. And also, I do love to draw a counter trend line because it kind of lets you avoid a lot of noise and waiting once you wait for the breakout of it. So let's see. Let's look for some chart patterns. Um, you see, it just be so messy. It just be so messy. It's different. Well, let's see. If I really wanted to help my odds of winning, I would also wait for New York session because I realize that you don't have to wait for New York session when it comes to trading bigger movements or like if you're taking confirmations from a 4 hour because it can happen at any time and it will be valid too. But if you want to get the ideal pristine entries, still wait for that 9:30, right? Because had I done that, I would have seen a double bottom that was formed, although it didn't finish until late, right? And also another thing, my stop losses have to be in just like it can't be as stingy as if I was trading the other time frames. So my stop loss would go right below here. My target would go to negative 27%. And that would be that. But it would still take time, right? Time, 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 time. So, so yeah, that is my formula of consistency that I'm even having my girl hold me accountable because, bro, this shit works. It's actually very effective. It's just if I lose sight of the higher time frame, we all die. we all going to hell. Like, it's not a good time. So, oh yeah, that's the trade. That's the only trade I'm looking at today is oil. So yeah, happy trading. Hope y'all had a great trading week. I know I did. Let's go into next week with more.